Hello, everybody, and for those of you watching on video, you'll see that we have a guest on the 236th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And our guest this week is a colleague that I have known, 20 odd years,
Yeah.
longer even.
Yeah.
We were both HMI in Ofsted at a very different time for the inspectorate, but I'm absolutely delighted that after some struggles to get the date, but I'm glad to say Mr. Dave Rzeznik has joined us this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Dave. It's an absolute pleasure, and I have to say, I think we took our work very seriously, but I don't think I enjoyed working with an HMI more than I enjoyed working with you.
Oh, well,
It was an
thank you very much. Me too.
absolute joy. Um, okay, so we'll get on to Dave, who he is, what he's doing. But before we do that, always go to Stan. How are you this morning, Stan?
I'm fine, but I think we should be asking how you are. Recently operated on and the rest.
Yeah, well, I'm feeling a little bit better. I didn't realize that when you have a hernia operation, that the scarring hurts more inside than it does outside. So my stomach has tightened up somewhat and is sort of quite hard. So I it's been quite painful, but I do feel yesterday and today I feel as though I'm on the mend. So it was just over it was 8 days ago that I had the operation. So this should all clear. Yeah, I should be a little bit better by the end of the week, and I'm looking forward to actually meeting up with our family on. We had the Essex group came up last weekend. It was fantastic. This weekend, on my wife's side, we're meeting her brother and her sister and their partners, which we do every year. So yeah, we're going off, Dave. We're going off to Prestbury, which is where all the footballers live.
Very nice.
You know, I mean, it's
Very nice.
very
Very
nice.
nice, Frank. Hopefully you're going to pay for everything.
You do know Frank better than most, then.
or,
Have you
or
ever seen the inside of his wallet?
do you know? I don't know how this joke started, but it's perpetuated my entire life as an HMI. I mean, John Gornall just pushes this button every time we meet, and then everybody he meets, they push the button as well. So anyway,
Well, do you
before,
remember when your wallet, allegedly, your wallet got stolen off the train in London? I just think it was a ruse to make sure that you didn't have to pay for anything subsequently. Do you remember
I do remember, and what it was I talking to you at the time, Dave?
that? You were.
And what happened was I was just leaving Euston, a very empty train. It was sort of like 10:30 in the morning. And I put my jacket on the back of the seat. And in those days, Dave, HMI had first class travel.
You did.
And I put the jacket on the back of the seat. Didn't realise as this guy walked past, he took my wallet from the inside of my
Yeah.
jacket and then went off to the Halifax Building Society to try and withdraw money. I then got a call from the police. No, I noticed my wallet had gone because the conductor came down and wanted my ticket. So I phoned the bank, and then I got a call from the police to say, did I have an account? Am I in Halifax? I said, no, I'm not in Halifax. We've just moved out of Euston. He said, well, somebody's taken money out of Halifax. And I said, well, how did they get there in that time? And he meant, no, Halifax Building Society on the Euston Road. But anyway, yeah. So actually, we'll get onto the chat in a minute. But I was then interviewed by the police back home because this was going on. This had been going on for
Right.
8 or 9 months, and they knew who they were. But all they needed to do, the transport police, was actually catch them, and
Right.
they were finding it quite difficult. But they had it on CCTV. So anyway, I was interviewed,
Okay.
and they
Oh,
were arrested, and they were imprisoned.
good.
So
Good.
Did you get
right,
your wallet back, Frank?
no, Dave's
So,
probably got it.
so ever since then, you've not been able to pay for anything.
That's. Do you know what?
Dear.
This chat has gone down exactly the same road that the work I used to do with Dave Rzeznik went down all the time.
No, no, I'll move on.
Right. Well, let's get on to what's caught our eye. Oh, no, let's get on to what's Dave Rzeznik doing at the moment. So, how are you
Um,
filling your time? What have you done since you left HMI, Dave?
well, I then became a school improvement advisor. I've done a whole range of things, working with independent schools, working with maintained schools, working with academies. Um, trying to make sure that children in any of the schools I'm involved in get a good education, which I enjoy. Prior to that, before we became an HMI, I was a head teacher, 16 years in two schools. One was special measures, turned that round, and the other one was a coasting school and got that to outstanding. Before that, interestingly, I was English as an additional language advisor.
Yeah.
And before that, a language reception unit for non-English speaking children. And then before that, classroom teacher. So,
Do you know what's coming out of this, Dave? Is because I said to Stan, you know, you've got this expertise in EAL. There's a little bit of history in that. But when you were describing that background, it was the breadth of those experiences that you were able to bring to your work as an HMI. That I think somewhere along the line we've lost a little bit of that.
Yes, I mean, if we get to what the one thing nationally that I'd like to see happen, we might get to that later on. I've got something that is old school from my early career, and it's to do with subject conferences nationally, that where the subject HMI used to use the best practitioners in the country to share their practice with schools in England, and that was a great success. So when we get onto that, I wish that would be something that would happen. So that's me, Yesley. Yeah.
Great. Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I've been ploughing through, looking at the inspection framework, just to be able to advise schools that it's on its way and what they need to do to prepare. And I was intrigued by the role of nominee, which is new, I think, to this framework. But when I read it, it's typical of rushing something out, I think, without really considering it. Because it says the nominee can virtually do everything that every school does. For instance, where delegated, it can inform relevant stakeholders about the inspection, make sure that children, pupils and staff are informed about well, is there not a school in the land that does that? And it's usually the senior leadership team that do all those. But halfway through, it says that the head teacher can choose to be this nominee, whose job it is to share and link with the lead inspector throughout the inspection and sort of follow the inspector around. So, one, how can you possibly liaise with yourself unless you've got some sort of split personality, which would be interesting to video and watch? But secondly, what about small schools? What they can do? Because it doesn't suggest anywhere you can bring somebody in to do that role, which I would have thought may have been beneficial to small schools, to bring their school advisor or someone who knows the school well in. But it clearly says it's a member of staff. But the role it's really strange, and you can get trained on it if you want.
Yeah, I know they're going to roll out some training for nominees, but I think the point, I mean, I've got two hats here, haven't I, on my guitars. It's like the head teacher is saying, "Oh no, I'm the nominee now. No, I'm not. Now I'm the head teacher." You know, I mean, that you know, it just feels to me, you know, I mean.
And on the initial phone call, because the nominee can be part of that, it lists the people who can be sharing that phone call. So it starts by saying the CEO and somebody like blah, 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 blah. And then it says the head teacher and anyone he thinks is appropriate. So why not just start with that one?
Yeah. I mean, I think the issue is, of course, is that a lot of small schools are not part of trusts. That seems to have been forgotten about. You know, this is an issue. There are 2,000 schools in the UK. This is primary schools that have less than 100 pupils. So that means they're probably running on 3 classes, 3 or 4 classes. And, you know, that's at the top end. So 100 within that, that's a 90 pupil school, 30.
One of my schools in Lancashire, Frank, had 38 children.
Yeah. So I just, when I read it, I was contacted by the National Association of Small Schools. So I've written a piece for Schools Week about small schools and how inappropriate the framework is. If you look at, I did a word search for small schools, it's raised twice, and there's no specific guidance on it. It just says inspectors need to make allowances. It doesn't give any guidance as to what that allowance is. And as far as I'm aware, there is very, very limited training being offered on these 50 modules that HMI and AIs are having to sit through in order to keep the registration. So it really is an issue about who's written this. This is it. I think if I shared that with Dave, if I'd been responsible for development framework, I would have shared that with you probably, Dave, wouldn't I? It's the sort of thing you tended to do. And immediately what would happen is someone like Dave or another colleague would come back, not in a negative way, but they'd say, you really need to put a bit more focus on the small school element or the special school side of it. All of that was really helpful advice. It'd be interesting to know how extensive the sharing of this work has been in its development. It really would. But anyway, yeah. So, Dave, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, government guidance on best practice is going to be produced to help schools set up and run SEN and pupil support units as part of that kind of inclusion push. And I work with a number of alternative providers and pupil referral units and independent schools and maintained schools as well. And one of the issues in the maintained schools is that we all know that the children need special educational needs getting more complex and they're getting younger. And a lot of the children can't cope in mainstream classrooms and need particular interventions. And some schools are trying to open resource provision to benefit those children. And to a certain extent, some of the schools I work in, they haven't got a rationale for it. So they're unclear. What they're clear about is they've got to make provision for these youngsters. What they're unclear about is that they may not have the they haven't got a rationale, they haven't necessarily got the expertise, they haven't got the accommodation, and they haven't got the money. So best practice will only happen if you've got implementation. And my experience has been that some of the units that are created are probably suitable initially for the children in the early years and possibly year one. But then after year one, they've got a problem because they've got to, on the one hand, deliver the national curriculum, or on the other hand, kind of modify it for a period of time before the children get onto the national curriculum. So in some schools, it's a mess because they haven't got a rationale, they haven't got the expertise, they haven't got the accommodation, they haven't got the money. So they do it half-cocked, really. Then you get other schools who do it well and have got the expertise, or if they haven't, bring the expertise in and then get the necessary resources. For example, to cope with a child who's a mute. One of the schools had got a deaf child and a blind child turned up. And their teacher said, well, that's this child in specialist. Well, actually, you've got to admit the child into the school. So then you've got the individuals, then you've got the cohorts of children. And what struck me was, yes, we're going to get best practice guidance, but the reality, I think, is the implementation of it. Because some of the schools I'm working with, some of them are doing it very well, some of them are thinking about doing it, and some of them have started to work and seen what the difficulties are.
In a couple of my schools, they've done it as a reaction to children with severe and complex needs suddenly arriving in reception and having to say, these children, we cannot teach them with the rest of the reception. So we need to somehow and I've seen all sorts from office units being dropped onto the site and also, but you're right, Dave, that it's okay. It's dealing with it for the first couple of years, and then there's got to be a plan beyond that. Yeah,
that's lacking, and the fact of the curriculum or the activities and the quality of the education that the children are getting, and that all rests on the fact that there's been proper assessment of the child's condition. I mean, I go into some schools and it's quite clear, even with experienced Senkos and some are inexperienced, but sometimes the children, take autism, for example. More and more children in the schools I'm working at in Coventry have got children who, to all intents and purposes, they may not have been diagnosed, but have got autistic tendencies or elements of on the spectrum. They just haven't got the expertise. The people aren't there to actually do the assessment. And even once they've done the assessment, to actually have the expertise to teach those children. That's just one example, but you could go on to other examples of other conditions that they haven't been assessed properly. So if they're not assessed properly, then, well, how do you then provide the necessary provision?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting the use of the use of the term spectrum as well, because I know that those colleagues who are involved in this area don't quite like. They understand the reasons why we revert to using a spectrum, but actually they say that it's often much more complex, and so there are this element here, there's that element there, there's this element and that element, and all of that together makes up that child. So I think, and for me, that's quite helpful in trying to understand why, you need to pick up on the point you made, Dave, about, you need to have very skilled, experienced people involved in this. This is not an easy thing, to get right.
Got to have a rationale that says that at some point this particular school cannot manage this child, because that is the bit that I know in a school local to me, there's a child in reception who doesn't engage with anything, is violent and wrecks rooms and things, and his parents are insistent that he stays in the main school. And because they're insistent, because he's got his plan, that's how it stands until somebody makes a ruling that says no, there has to be a professional judgment for the child's sake, to say the child needs to be in the best possible place to educate the child.
In some situations, when I've been working with Matt, the cost of getting an autism assessment, or the support that's available to support the child, on occasions tends to fall on the parents, and it's quite an expensive process. And I write in some of my reports, whether they do it or not, it's another matter, that actually, if you can't provide for the needs and the assessment of those that are the most vulnerable with the most complex needs, what are you doing? So therefore, the Met should be paying for that, in my view. And that's happened in some cases, because coming back to it, if you've got an ailment, Frank, you'll go to the doctor, won't you? If the doctor can't tell you what it is, you'll go to a consultant, an expert who does know what it is. And once you know what the condition is, then you can do something about it, can't you?
Yeah.
It's the same with children, in my view, with special educational needs. They're very complex.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they've got more than one need. I've got children who've got complex needs. They've got a variety of things that are going on, plus traumatic backgrounds. So to actually provide the provision for that is not easy. I'm not saying it is.
It's interesting. I was the chair of the Blackpool Education Improvement Board for 4 years during the COVID period. And prior to COVID, around 2018, I think Blackpool had the highest rate of permanent exclusions in the country. There was only 8 secondary schools, very, very, very few exclusions coming out of primaries. But as soon as they hit the secondary phase, these exclusions were going through the roof. And basically, we started to use a lot more data. So we started to analyse, where are these children coming from? What are some of the issues here that sit underneath it? And in an attempt to try and reduce it, the local authority gave a sum of money to each secondary school to try and create the sorts of environments where children that were vulnerable, there would be a place where they could have some time where they could sort of find their way back, it's not wasted time. It was not sitting in a room just, being told to do your work there.
Yeah.
But there were staff there. Now it's interesting. That money was given. I think it was for 2 years, and all of those secondary schools, virtually all of them, recreated a primary classroom.
Yeah.
That's what they did, and they got some primary expertise in that worked with those children, and that proved in some cases really, really successful. What was interesting, just picking up the point you made, Dave, there was a reluctance amongst some schools to share what they were doing with some of the other schools.
Right.
Even if it was a case of saying, I didn't really want to share it because we didn't think it was very good, or we think we've cracked it, but we don't really want everybody else to know about it. And in a way, there's that sort of like competitive element sitting behind all of this, that actually prevents some of that best practice being shared.
That to me is very sad. I mean, I know of situations where schools with what we're talking about now, training up their own SEN, getting their own expertise, whether it's with teachers, leaders, or teaching assistants or higher level teaching assistants. So they train them up to work with those children, and then those staff are poached.
Yes.
Partly because they're not paying them. I'm saying poached. They're encouraged to cross their paths with silver, and they move on. So because the schools can't afford there is expertise out there. It's in short demand, but it's expensive, and there isn't enough to go around. So I say to the schools, look, if you've got 20% of your children who have got social emotional difficulties, conditions, autism elements, neurodiversity, whatever they've got, you need to train your own staff up longer term to do that. And then the other issue is you don't want them to be going off once you've done that to restart it all again. So it's a bit of a moving feast, really.
The other sad thing why schools probably or possibly don't want to share that expertise is they don't want to become known as a school that deals really well with SEN or with difficult children or with vulnerable children, because it encourages more.
Okay, so that's exactly what happens, Stan.
Yeah.
And the parents talk to each other. I mean, when I was inspecting in the days when the parents had the lead inspector's mobile number, 99% of the calls I got were from parents with SEN, and mainly to do with the fact that the school wasn't meeting their child's needs, or the local authority wasn't. It was overwhelmingly to do with their concerns, and they didn't think the provision was making provision for their child, which is very, very sad, isn't it? That we've got to 2025, and one of the issues in local authorities is the thresholds to get them into the special schools in local authorities I work with are full. In even the special schools I work with, they should be going to other alternative provision to deal with their needs. So it's basically you've got a pipeline that's chock-a-block in each of the things, and they're increasing the thresholds because they haven't got the money to then provide in the HCP plans. Who knows what's going on with them in the future? You with me?
Yeah.
But there just simply isn't the capacity within the system to meet the need.
And I still think some parents see that getting that plan as the passport to solving all their child's problems.
And also they I mean, I went to the first day of a new unit attached to a primary school about 3 weeks ago, and on the first day it went incredibly well. These are new children to this centre, and the staff were working on their first day. You'd make a few allowances, bearing in mind you know the children a little bit, but not very well. But one of the parents by lunchtime, because the parents are encouraged to stay for the first hour just to settle them in. But by lunchtime, one of the parents had complained to the head teacher that as far as she could see, her child was not getting one-to-one support from a member of staff. And when the head teacher looked at the actual plan, that's what it said. The child needed one-to-one support, and that had been interpreted as that person needs a person with them all the time. Imagine the cost of that the cost of that. And so what the head teacher was saying, well, the provision is the way that we view it, that adult will be there overseeing the child, but that doesn't mean it's one-to-one contact at all time, which would be, I think, quite detrimental to the development of the child.
You're not going to promote independence amongst that child with that child if you're going to interpret it that way, because at the end of the day, in this provision, the ultimate aim should be that the child is able to cope in the mainstream classroom. They should not, in my view, be isolated long term. They should be able to participate, because sometimes the units that I see are units where they're like like separate, whereas they should be integrated from time to time in the mainstream curriculum with support. That doesn't always happen. Out of sight, out of mind type thing. You with me? Relieve teachers from the pressure, which Stan was, hinting at. But it's a very complex issue, and at the end of the day, schools are having to wrestle with this. So I'll be interested to read the best practice. When I read it, I'm thinking, we might have best practice, but the problem's going to be the implementation of it. As always.
Yeah. I mean, if I can just finish it off with what's caught my eye this week, mine was around thinking about going back to the lay inspector. Now, this isn't about Ofsted, so don't worry, folks. I'm not having a dig at Ofsted again. But it was around the introduction of lay inspectors was primarily done to ensure that there was a sort of independent non-education viewpoint added to a team of inspectors. There were one person in those days when they were introduced. There were sort of, in secondary schools, there were hordes of inspectors. So, virtually every subject area would have somebody responsible for that subject. And in a primary school, you'd have 5 or 6 inspectors, of which one would be, a lay inspector. And it's interesting, I was thinking about the role of self-evaluation, both in terms of understanding how effectively a school is, but also in terms of helping with having to share your findings. And I think there's some real value in something like an independent person just popping into every school, not as part of an inspection process or checking, but to actually sort of give a sense of, well, what did it actually feel like when you walked into that school? How did that hour visit feel? And for me, I remember going to a local school here. I was going to see the head teacher. I was an advisor in Stockport, and I was sitting in reception, and it was at the changeover time, and it was a secondary school. And I have to say the secretary, the receptionist, managed me so brilliantly well as the group of children that came wanting, I don't know, this, that, and everything else. Can you phone my mum? I'm playing netball or something. But she actually managed it really, really well. Now, I mean, we've all made hundreds and hundreds of visits to schools. But why is it that one visit struck me as a really positive experience? I don't know what the quality of the learning was. I mean, I actually went to see a member of staff. I didn't go into lessons. But there was something about the independent view that I brought at that time that thought, there's something welcoming about this. There's something right. The sort of relationships between that receptionist and the students was really good. The receptionist was responding to me really well. And bearing in mind, the first person you often meet is that receptionist. And I think Stan's got evidence of that working really well and working really, really badly.
Yeah, well, it's when we describe someone who's very forthcoming and helps you. But I've also got a colleague who we both know who was ahead in the middle of Burnley, and she needed a Rottweiler. She said at the window, she wanted somebody who's going to really go for parents, keep them in check. Yeah. But I just think of the lay inspector, Frank. I know we not related to Ofsted, but I had an experience with a lay inspector in my first year as a lead inspector. When I went out at lunchtime, came back in, and the head said, "I need to see you. I've sent your lay inspector off the premises." I'm not sure you can do that. Well, I have, because he's an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's just having that sort of independent view of what is working, what isn't working. I think the problem sometimes when I'm invited into schools, they always want me to say, well, what do you think? What do you think it is? And I think, well, I haven't inspected for years, but actually, my insight is more about the sort of things that I see and the observations. And often we get into, remember saying to the head teacher recently, I said, you're not going to reveal this to an inspector, but what is your weakest subject? Now, I think he'll tell me, but he won't tell the inspector. And it's really, I think that's a real shame that lack of openness about, well, that inspector's got, may have years of experience, may actually help move the thing forward. But everyone's driven by, the grade. That we've lost a little bit of that professional dialogue.
There is no professional dialogue anymore like that. That person who comes in to inspect you isn't thinking long term about how I can help your school to improve. They've got a job to do. I remember saying to my NQT, who was in charge of music, look, I know that music's not very good in our school. You know that music's not very good in our school. The inspector doesn't know that. So let's not give them any clues.
Yeah, I mean, I'll end the conversation here, Dave, with do good as you go.
Yeah. And also the other one, speak without fear or favour.
Oh yeah.
I mean those statements. At the end of the day, we're all there for the benefit to make sure the children get a good education. And
we got it right, didn't we?
Yeah, and if the most vulnerable, disadvantaged can't get the resources and the support, I mean, a good litmus test of a school is if the SEN pupils and the beginners in English are getting a good deal, you can generally bet the rest of them are getting a good deal.
Yeah.
So it depends where you look. If you want to find out about racism, I learned some important things when I was an HMI. If you want to learn about racism, you go and talk to the Gypsy Roma kids.
Yes.
If you want to find out about SEN pupils' provision, then you go to the parents who are getting that provision.
Yeah.
So it depends where you look. You with me? And I think that it'd be interesting to see what the new framework brings. We haven't got time to talk about that.
That would be we have covered that a few times on this.
Yeah.
On your independent thing, what I'm finding now that's new to me, doing a pickup for my grandson in coming out of nursery, is the completely different view I have on education at that point. I want a happy child coming out. Nothing else more important than he's happy.
Yeah,
enjoying life.
Yeah.
Enjoying the experience. I think the pressure does start, doesn't it? Coming back wherever the pressure comes from, nursery and reception. You're making sure that they're meeting the early learning goal national figures. And I mean, the toolkit framework is going to make it. Ofsted have gone from, not particularly looking at the achievement and attendance and the learning outcomes, and now it's written in black and white that they are. So you're thinking there's real mixed messages going on here as to actually how we're judging school quality.
And also it's not a good look when the former chief inspector is dissing the current chief inspector's new framework. That you may have that view, but I don't think you should be sharing that view in public. I think there's something
definitely
that takes that above that. I think it's okay for you and me to diss it. I do, we've never held that high rank, but actually, if you have held that high rank, I think you've got to behave and conduct yourself in a slightly different manner. I think it's, I think there are some major issues with this current framework, but I just don't think the former chief inspector should be coming out in the way she has, sort of criticising, what the current chief inspector is doing.
I also think, while we're on that, that it's not a good thing for the former chief inspectors to be evaluating aspects of Ofsted, like their complaints policy.
Mm,
I mean, it puts them in a difficult position, I think,
it does.
because they know the ins and outs of Ofsted. That a former chief inspector is actually evaluating aspects of Ofsted's provision. That's for the Secretary of State to sort that out. I mean, if I was not an honour in that position, but I don't think it's a good look.
No. Yeah. We're not on Ofsted today, though, are we? We're
No,
going.
not.
We're
I've
going
not
to
even used my buzzer once to stop you.
He has this damn buzzer. Blah 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 blah.
30 minutes up.
Yeah. Whenever Ofsted's name called out, he gets his little buzzer out and has a warning sign.
Oh, I thought he got a clock there. He's time to go to the loo, Stan. I thought it might be time to go to the loo.
And
No, I've got a full day. I've got a team meeting shortly after this.
All right, okay.
A science inspector to go out as a governor. What else have I got? I've got feedback at 4:30. I'm going to be dashing around all over the place today.
Right. Well,
right,
Dave,
okay.
can I just say it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on as a guest, and just want to thank you for your honesty and all that support you've given me over the years, and the fun we've had. Yeah. So if anybody's interested in making contact with Dave, you just are your details on the internet there, Dave?
Not really. No, I never.
You don't put yourself out there in that way.
LinkedIn, not in LinkedIn, but if anybody wants to get in contact with me, then
they could do it through me. They could do it through me.
They can certainly do it through you. You've got all my details.
Yeah,
so.
and I was quite used to being Dave Rzeznik's PA when we worked together. So
you can keep me on track.
Right. Okay. Well, we have another chat on Friday and we're going to be talking about curriculum. So, and the reason why we've got 2 chats in a week is primarily because we had to rearrange one of these. Not Dave's one, but this one on Friday has been rearranged. So you'll see us again on Friday. But thank you so much, Dave, and look forward.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Thank you for the invitation. First time I've ever been on a podcast type chat. So I look forward to seeing myself on FaceTube later on.
Okay. See you, folks.
Yeah.
See you. Bye-bye, everyone.